This is a clip from the Red Cow Arcade podcast.
Hey, I've been on a Lord of the Rings kick again lately. I love those Lord of the Rings movies. And you know, social media and YouTube get a lot of flack for producing echo chambers by over recommending things that you've already shown some interest in. Sometimes it really works out though, because sometimes you're like, oh, I'd like to watch a clip from Lord of the Rings. And then you get recommended a flood of Lord of the Rings things, and you just really enjoy the rabbit hole. I'll say this: Peter Jackson, on the topic of celebrity deaths, I'm a little concerned about Peter Jackson because I know he's had like health that's gone up and down, but if you compare him in like 2011 to him now, just 10 years, he looks like he's aged about 80 years.
Wow.
And he's got like kind of like a tremor almost. Like I think something neurological is going on where he's stuttering way more. He's obviously big again, but he had lost a lot of weight before. I think something's up with him, and it's actually pretty worrying. But I bring up Lord of the Rings from a filmmaking perspective. Obviously, those movies were, I think, one of the, outside of all of the things that make them novel, one of the things that made them novel was the way they used DVD. Because every one of the deluxe cuts had 2 discs of appendices, which was like extensive. I think it was like something like 8 or 9 full-length documentaries about the making of that one movie. So you could just watch hours and hours and hours and hours of deep dives on how they made these things. It's just incredible.
I had those, and it was peak DVD era where you wanted to watch those.
I want to go back to that time, man. That's like my favorite. I still, when the Marvel shit drops, like the making of a Marvel show or whatever, I still think I'm going to get treated to something like that, and I get treated to just marketing material. But
there was like an interview recently with Matt Damon, and he was talking about how like he was they asked a question like, what's different about the movie industry? It's like, well, we used to sell DVDs and people actually like bought them and wanted to watch them, and you could make a movie and it didn't have to perform well on in the theaters, but as long as you have that DVD. And I think we did lose something. I think once the Blu-ray era came about, they stopped giving a for some reason.
Yeah.
And because the DVDs were always superior features. I know there's actually a James Rolfe video about this.
They were more like that Criterion sensibility was in the DVDs and not as much in the Blu-rays.
Yeah, and it was almost like you bought the DVD and you had almost documentaries about the movie. And
the DVD acted and functioned almost like the Library of Congress like copy of it. It was a good archive of the movie, not just the film itself, but all the supplemental material. This kind of meta version of the movie. It's how I regard my own work. It's probably why I continue to make optical media, is because I feel like if you just crap something out on a streaming platform, you never really finished the movie. Like you never produced anything per se, and there's nothing to keep, there's nothing to copy, but call me what you will. But anyway, one of the things that's great about those documentaries is they reveal all of their bad ideas. They go into detail about like, we were going to do this and we thought better of it, and here's how it ended up. And so there's some really good examples. One is like Arwen, the Liv Tyler character, was going to like lead the elves to Helm's Deep, the big giant battle set piece at the end of the second movie. And she was going to be a big part of the battle. And they shot it. They shot it for months or something. And they cut it all out. They're like, no, she shouldn't be there. Because they thought better of the story, or they cut it. They had enough time to cut it together. Or initially in the Crack of Doom at the end, when they're going to throw the ring in, Frodo just charges at Gollum and kills Gollum. He like they shot it that Frodo ran for the ring and charged Gollum and threw him in. And they thought better of it. They're like, well, he probably shouldn't kill him. The book says that Gollum dances with the ring and then accidentally falls in. That's also pretty stupid. It doesn't give the character any agency. So Frodo can't kill him, but he can't accidentally kill himself. But the ring has to go in the lava. So, what they reshot was Frodo and Gollum struggling for the ring. And then they both, in their carelessness, both slip off at the same time, which again, kind of narratively makes more sense. Or the big one, when Aragorn's army shows up at the Black Gate, they had it so that Sauron, the main character, the guy that's a big eyeball, that he actually manifests as a physical being and attacks Aragorn. Aragorn has to fight him physically, which takes all of the narrative focus off of Frodo and off of the fact that the ring is the main villain. But you can see how all of these decisions in screenplay format kind of make sense. You're like, well, the main hero, Aragorn, should fight the main villain, and Arwen should not be in the movie. She should we should factor her. You can sort of see it all. And
the studio notes and everything.
Yeah, that probably factors in too. But I imagine that the screenwriters thought like that this would follow good storytelling rules, or this would help tie up some of their looser characters or whatever. But it sounds like, I think what happened was because they had this really luxurious shooting schedule because they were making 3 movies at the same time. And then Peter Jackson, for all of his movies, he always budgets for extensive pickups. So the whole idea is like, we fly everybody out, we do a giant principal photography, they go away, we edit a lot, and we make a lot of the movie, and then we shoot another 6 weeks. So for 6 more weeks after we've edited, we reconstruct the film. And you can really tell that there was enough space on that production to make sure that they were always making the best decisions for the movie. And you can tell, everybody I think knows by now, on the Hobbit trilogy, there really just was no lead time. There was no space. They split there were supposed to be 2 movies. They split the second one into 2 movies and made it a trilogy just to give themselves more production time, just so they could spend more time on it. And it was a commercially viable decision, obviously, for the studio. So my point is, when you watch the Hobbit trilogy, I think you're watching obviously an improvised, an improvised process for filmmaking, but you're seeing all of Peter Jackson's first instincts, all of his bad ideas, all of the stuff that theoretically would have been revised, all of the stuff that really was in the pre-production for Lord of the Rings, that like time and wisdom and perspective filtered out.
Even I try to, in my job, I do a lot of video editing, and I try to address every bit of feedback, because even if verbally, because I feel like it comes from somewhere, even if they're not like artistic, they have a problem somewhere. And I know some people, they do criticism for criticism's sake, but you got to like listen. And when certain themes keep coming up, you're like, oh, okay, I know I have to address that.
Yeah. So you have to synthesize multiple data points to figure out what the solution is. So I think the biggest the thing that you have to factor in with people's feedback is they have a raw reaction. They have a visceral reaction. That's the one that's valuable to you. That's the one you want to know the most about, is the visceral reaction. And then they try to intellectualize it and feed it back to you. And they often feel obligated to provide you a solution while they're giving you the feedback, but the solution is often not obvious. So they'll often present it as like, I didn't like it because you didn't do this idea. Now here's my idea. But it's really, it's more like, no, something was actually missing. I mean, obviously in the YouTube content, it's like the benefit of it is you make it so fast that you get the dopamine hit of the feedback and the production of it all kind of in one go. But letting things marinate is valuable. I was, because of this Lord of the Rings rabbit hole, I was recommended this interview clip of Spielberg and Peter Jackson because they worked together on Tintin, that really bad motion capture CG movie. It was really
nobody
good.
talks about that.
I watched it on like a plane one time. It was like worse than sitting there and like breathing in the viruses. And but anyway, it's interesting to listen to 2 filmmaking masters talk at the same time. And Spielberg was saying that he likes to make movies fast so that he can kind of like maintain a level of excitement and inertia and objectivity. Because if you kind of like sit with a movie for too long, you don't even like know what the movie is anymore. I get that too.
I get that too. Yeah.
He also said, just on a side note, he said something that stuck with me, where he was like, they're like, what's your working relationship? And Spielberg was like, well, Peter's really chill. Like this guy like is always just like, it'll be all right. We'll just have patience and have a cup of tea, and we'll just wait for the answer to present itself. And Spielberg's like, I get rattled. He's like, I want to start like, I want to see the problem solved. And like Peter, is a good counterbalance to me. And the interviewer was like, so you're nervous? Like, you're Steven Spielberg. He's like, I'm not nervous, but he's like, I want to, like, I want to get the problem solved. I don't want to like be over patient or something. It made me feel good to hear, because I think I'm the rattled type, as well. It not to say that, obviously patience and calm is very valuable. And there's times where that's, I think, called for. That's what I'm going for. But other times, you feel like you have to play a very active hand in getting things solved.
Just have a cup of tea, Frankie.
It's probably good to have both personalities present. One with a bias towards action and one with a bias towards like calm and patience. That's probably a good thing to just have both.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely our working relationship.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of like makes sure that both that relationship is healthy. Of like, okay, are we continuing, or are we like waiting for a good reason?
My this kind of reminds me of something my parents say. Like, my dad's more of like the action oriented type, but he doesn't worry about anything. And my mom worries about everything. So like, my dad will always go to my mom and he's like, what do you worry about? And she's like, everything. And what do I worry about? And she says, nothing. And that's why we're good together.
That's awesome.
Subscribe to Red Cow Entertainment on Patreon for full episodes every other week.